Hi, everyone, and welcome to IC Data People. And we're glad to be joined by Mark Fleming Williams, the host of the Alternative Data Podcast. And some of you may not know that before he started this podcast, Mark was actually writing articles in Forbes. He was also the communication director at Exabel and recently turned to the buy side. Mark, it's awesome to have you here.
Awesome to be here. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Let's start and let's go back to 2020 when you launched the first episode of the Alternative Data Podcast. What led you to do it? What led you to start the podcast?
Well, I'd just done a master's in big data in Madrid and then had been trapped in my apartment by COVID in Madrid. And I'd managed to escape there and come back to London. And I landed in London knowing that I wanted to get into alternative data. I knew it was a space that combined a lot of my interests. I knew it was, where I wanted to be, but I didn't know anyone or to be honest, that much about it. And so usually what I do when I want to know about something is I go and try and listen to podcasts on it. And I found there really wasn't very many podcasts. And so had an epiphany in the shower that why don't I do the podcast? And actually it was a gap that needed filling in the market. It was something which I would learn at the same time. It was the idea that I would give something to the space at the same time, and then hopefully get something back, which was get myself a job. I mean, building the network as well might help with getting a job too. So it was this kind of it was a solution which really just seemed to fit, and it was a bizarre thing because sometimes it hasn't happened that often in my life, but sometimes when you know you're on the right path because it's just so easy to follow the path. I mean, podcasting technology had been around for 20 years, so that was all very easy. Getting guests was weirdly easy given that I was just a guy, and with a cartoon. Essentially the cartoon was there. Once you got that, then everyone takes you seriously. But so getting there, and I started with Saeed Amin, who had read the book of alternative data, so that was an easy start. So, and then that, I suppose, gave it credibility of some sort. And then I was off, and it's been, as you say, it's been 2.5 years of the Alternative Data Podcast. I've done 117 episodes or something, and it's been one of those things where it's just been really easy and fun as well, and productive, and people tell me it's useful. So it's one of those things kind of stumbled into this great, stroke of luck, really, I feel.
Mark, both Omri and I have been guests on the Alternative Data Podcast, and obviously you've had a lot of other industry leaders on the podcast. How has your definition of what constitutes alternative data changed or evolved in the 3 years you've been doing this?
So alternative data, what I have long said is alternative data is everything, all types of data that you won't find on a Bloomberg terminal. But that is becoming problematic because Bloomberg is getting ever more acquisitive of getting data on their terminals. So that's drying up as a definition. I feel like there has been a push against alternative data as a phrase, partly because it sounds a little bit like it's weird data or kind of like whatever, alternative facts or whatever, it sounds a bit kind of edgy or dark, but also it is really used by the financial industry, alternative data as a phrase. And so external data is the alternative phrase, which is much more holistic, and we're talking about the same data. And so external data is perhaps the more inclusive term for alternative data. This doesn't help me with my podcast, to be honest. Somebody needs to create the external data podcast soon, I think, to be a rival. Maybe I should pivot, but I don't know. Broadly, I do say the conversation which has been going on for years is, when will alternative data just become data? But so I'm now in data sourcing for a living for a quantitative hedge fund called CFM. I don't hear the word alternative data that often. I just tend to hear data. Really, it's alternative data feels maybe like it's beginning to outlive its usefulness as a phrase. It is just becoming data. There are, and you need alternative data to invest. So yeah, why is it alternative? Why isn't it just data? I'm coming around. I've realized while giving this answer.
So you alluded to this in your answer, but you're now on the buy side. You were previously on the sell side. Before that, you were a journalist. I'm curious how those different roles, those different perspectives have changed as you've really evolved with the industry. So how have these roles given you a unique perspective?
So I wasn't a journalist, I was a geopolitical intelligence analyst. And the difference is that a journalist reports what's going on, and hopefully a geopolitical intelligence analyst is somebody who kind of connects the dots a little bit more and builds a picture of and also it's prediction as well. It's got a forecasting aspect. But so my roles, my geopolitical was wonderfully useful for helping me understand how the world fits together, and gave me all sorts of kind of background knowledge. I'm not sure it was a wonderful grounding for this specific question though on alternative data. I think so my roles which have been most relevant are the podcast, which has given me this wonderful ability to kind of just be part of the community. Essentially, alternative data is this very enclosed space where a lot of people know a lot of people. You'll see a lot of familiar faces if you go to an alternative data conference. It's it's a good thing and a bad thing actually, because it suggests that it hasn't, it's still an enclosed world in that. But there's a great sense of community, and somehow information does get around it, even though there aren't that many channels like the podcast. It does, the information does get around it. So that's the first thing, is to how the podcast has shown me how deeply connected everything is. My experience at Exabel, which is an alternative data platform based out of Oslo, I was incredibly impressed with just the quality of people actually who are being hired and who are moving around in this space, and just the high quality of intelligence and also kind of humaneness and humanity. So I was extremely impressed with how impressive everyone is. The perspective that CFM has given me, or being on the buy side has given me, is it's incredibly how nice everyone is. Suddenly it's very, very nice to me, and it's bad. You feel like a kind of, you feel like a supermodel or member of the royal family. I was saying this week to someone, because you don't know, are they being nice to me because I'm great, or are they being nice to me because of that? So again, it's a mixed blessing, but no. So it's alternative data is essentially, it's the future. It's bringing. It feels very vibrant and very exciting, and so all of the different roles I've had in it have shown that.
You've talked to many people in the industry and many data vendors. What do you think is the most useful and interesting insights you've seen from data?
Well, so when I go for a Hollywood data set, then I tend to reach for Helios Life, which is, I suppose, is becoming familiar now to a lot of people. I think they're at South by Southwest at the moment, which just shows what a Hollywood data set they are. But they are doing audio NLP essentially, so analyzing the tone of earnings calls and trying to discover if there's suppressed excitement in the CEO or investor relations person, which shows that perhaps they know something that the market doesn't, that they're not saying. And so it's wonderfully cutting edge to actually be analyzing the tone. But we're used to the idea of analyzing the actual words themselves, but analyzing the tone still feels very, it's cutting edge. And during my master's in big data, that was kind of seen as the future. So it was exciting for me to come across it actually in real time.
So Mark, what a challenge is no one talking about in the alternative data industry? What's the next thing around the corner here?
So the challenge that nobody is talking about in alternative data, and actually it's not necessarily the next thing around the corner, it's the thing which is right now, and the reason no one's talking about it is because it's quite obscure, but it's something which suddenly hit us as a data sourcer myself, is this obscure law in the US around publicly traded partnerships. I don't know if you guys know about this, but it's a law which is defined by the US, and it's a question, and essentially investors need to find which of their stocks are under this law and which are not. And actually the challenge has been getting hold of the data which tells you whether it's under the law or not. And there's a lot of stress involved, because if you're trading something which is under the law and you don't know it, then there could be repercussions. So this is a huge challenge at the moment in trading, and it's data related, in actually finding these data sets. And we've gone to you go to all of the usual suspects to provide this data, and a lot of people are taken by surprise. So that's the challenge that nobody's talking about at the moment.
Very interesting. And let's continue this line. What's your most controversial opinion?
So my most controversial opinion, brace yourselves, is jail time for people who charge money for trials. I think charging money for trials to a quant fund just shows a massive lack of business sense, a complete misunderstanding of how the model works. It is making it harder for us to trial, which ultimately makes it harder for us to get to the point where we're going to buy your data, which is what everybody wants. And it is essentially, it's charging us for walking into a shop and picking up a product and looking at it. And during that process, I don't know the brief education of the quant method, but we study the history, the dead data, the historical data in order to extract a signal from it as long as possible, and then as long a history as possible. And then once we have found a signal which is tradable, then we go and commit to buying the live data on an ongoing basis to trade that signal. So charging us for the trial, for looking at the history, is saying it's going to cost you to look at the product. It shows naivety, and it shows a kind of it often shows that they're not used to dealing with quant funds, but it is so frustrating. So that's my controversial opinion. Lock them all up.
All right. Well, aside from a bunch of data vendors being thrown in jail, what do you expect the biggest change to be in the alternative data industry or the data industry writ large over the next 5 years?
Well, the Hollywood stuff at the moment, and what everyone's focus is on is Chat GPT, obviously, and it's something which I don't think anyone really has got their heads around all the ways that it's going to change the data industry in every industry. It's already having effects in the hedge fund industry, which is in the news, and all sorts. So that's a huge nuclear weapon that's just exploded in this industry, and the effects of it are still becoming clear. But as a result, I quite want to point at things which we might have forgotten. Well, so the Internet of Things is something which was discussed, I think, an awful lot 2 or 3 years ago, and I feel like we're still waiting on the data. I feel like we're still waiting on the data which is coming from the fridges and the toasters and the appliances and all the rest of Internet of Things. I feel like there's a huge amount of data still to come from that. And I'll point again at also self-driving cars. It's something which we've been promised and nobody's talking about anymore. But there's a huge amount of connected data which we've forgotten about, really, as a culture. I feel which I want to, and we never did get our we were promised rocket packs, weren't we, and hoverboards. We never did get them in the end. But I still want my data out of my self-driving cars. So that's what I would point at.
Mark, thank you very much. And I think summarizing what you said is about the connectivity of either IoT data, but actually most important thing is the people. So really great to have you here. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you very much for having me.